direction, and I'll come back in a little while and talk about some of the thoughts that went through my mind as I was firing
Correct.
back.
Yeah.
But I fired back. When I fired, he stopped. I then rolled to my right a couple of times, managed to get to my feet, staggered around the corner of the house looking for somewhere safe to hide. There was a trail of blood behind me on the ground as I was moving around, but my legs started to grow weak, just with the damage, the blood loss, the injuries themselves. And as I moved around, I fell to the ground again, crawled along on the ground on my knees, my body getting weaker. I fell to my hands and knees. So I'm absolutely losing strength and power. Crawled along on my knees and hands and knees for a little while. And then I dropped to the ground, rolled onto my back, and that's where I stayed for about the next 3 hours. Now, at that time where I collapsed on the ground, my mind went into a complete state of panic. Didn't have another rational thought for the next couple of minutes. All I wanted to do was to turn time back. Now, this is something that people relate to quite easily.
Correct.
Because sometimes when things start going wrong, they go, oh, if I could just go back, I'll do that differently.
Yes.
That's exactly what ran through my mind. As logical and process-driven as I am, that's what was happening in my mind. I just want to turn time back.
That was your initial reaction to something that you were experiencing?
My initial reaction was actually very, very planned and methodical, where I fired back.
Yep.
I got out
That's
of
what you've been trained to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But at the point where I collapsed, I'd never been trained for what I do when I collapse. And that's when my mind started to panic.
And I think there'd be a lot of people probably that can relate to that very point
Absolutely.
too, you know, that are in world of business and in life nowadays too, right?
Absolutely.
That's got a lot of relevance to it.
And when we just talk about that, a lot of people say, well, you know, this is an interesting story, Derek, that you trained to be shot 14 times and you're able to survive that. How do I relate that to business? And my relevance to everybody's challenge, like I work with children in schools, I work with electricians, I work with, who was I working with the other day? Dentists, CEOs, finance. I say that I prepared myself for what I could realistically expect to encounter as a result of the choices that I made and the circumstances I put myself in. Now, if I was to go into an accounting firm and say, all right, I want to start being an accountant, I'd be completely overwhelmed, right? Because I'm not prepared for that. Accountants know what they need to do and they train for that. So what I like people to do is have some anticipation of what they can expect to encounter in their day-to-day life, and let's prepare them for that.